Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cup Interviews. My name is Jillian Robinson. I am the associate producer here at Cup of Hemlock. And today I have a very special guest with me. She is a performer, intimacy director, theater educator, previous virtual colleague of mine, Corey Tazmania. Corey, how you doing?
I'm all right.
That's good. Yeah. I love that.
Well, happy spring.
Happy spring. Yes.
So needed.
Finally.
Gosh. Yeah.
We
Having
made it
the
over the
windows
winter
open.
hump. Yes.
Hmm.
Beautiful. And speaking of spring, something has sprung beside you. This plant. Who is this?
So this is Stan. Stan is named Stan after Stan Lee because this is a spider plant.
Yes. Stan.
And
We stand for Stan.
That's right. And Stan was given to me by a fellow graduate school mate, Amanda Burnett. And she had it was just like this little tiny little baby that she gave me, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe. And put it in a little thing of soil. And each year I've had to repot it and repot it and repot it, and now it's got babies.
Oh my gosh.
Stan has flourished like nobody's business.
Love it. So Stan is very happy that it's spring.
Yeah.
Nice. So great. So to kick it off, I'll ask the question we ask everyone here at Cup of Hemlock. What is in your cup today?
Oh, what is in my cup today? So it has a quote. I will read you the quote. One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. This is a quote from Mr. William Shakespeare.
Oh, yes.
And so, of course, then it would be none other but then your hawthorn and hibiscus tea.
Okay. Yes. I'm loving that. I sense a theme going on here.
What, flowers? Lots of flowers.
Yes. Lots of flowers. I am drinking from the cup, and I am also drinking traditional medicinals. However, mine is throat coat. I'm feeling a bit dry with this weather change, so the vocal cords are like, please nourish me. So throat coat,
I have throat coat every morning.
Yeah, it's works miracles. That and steaming, it saved my life. And this big giant beautiful boy of water. Great. So we're hydrated. We are cozy today. I love that. So yes, Stan. Corey, tell us about yourself. How did you get into theater? What are some genres you've explored through theater throughout your career? Just open us up to you.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. So an easy way in is that when I was a little girl, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and my parents both worked nights. My mother worked in the restaurant business, and my father worked in the theater business. And my father was from a long standing tradition of family members that were local one stagehands for Broadway. And so as a kid, with childcare as it was, or affordability as it was for childcare, a lot of times it was take your daughter to work day. And so, with my mom, I would, shell shrimp or, grate carrots or, something like that. And with my dad, I would sit in the sound booth with him while he ran shows. And there was one show that I saw called Sweeney Todd. And my dad worked on it for a while, and I saw it a lot, and it blew my mind. Totally blew my mind. And it blew my mind on a number of levels, but I think the biggest level was that it was an ensemble, like a true ensemble. The designers, the musicians, the choreography, the actors, the stagehands. There was something about the entire health of the organization that was forward thinking and really rallied around a particular story that was, I thought, complex and deep and full of the human spectrum in a way that I had never, encountered before, and I fell in love, and I wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, of course. Sondheim, it'll do that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's stunning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, I like all kids who have an interest in arts.
Mhm.
I took lessons and, took singing lessons and did gymnastics and took piano lessons and, acted in the school plays and, I did all of that. And in New York City, there are a couple of professional performing arts schools now, but at the time there weren't that many. And the one public school that was available was at the time the High School of Performing Arts, which then changed to
Okay.
LaGuardia School of the Arts. And so I auditioned and got in for acting and went there and and did all of that and just kept studying. And there are times when I felt like I needed to branch out, that I wasn't sure if this is really what I wanted, and would try other things. Like for a while I was interested in education, which was really helpful, something that I still utilize, so I'm glad I learned more about that. But every time I would try and go to another field, I would always come back. And it was something about those other fields either informed me or still weren't enough. And so I kept choosing theater.
And we are very glad that you did. So you started out in New York, but right now you're currently living in Toronto. So yeah, so how did you get here?
Yeah, really good question. So, I traveled around for a while. Really, I got my first professional experience in San Francisco, California, and then decided to come back to New York because New York theater, that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I felt that, San Francisco was a really great education. And I wanted to try my hand at New York City, where my family was. And so I worked in New York for a while and, built up enough credits to join the union. And um, uh, till about, I guess, like 2016, I think. I also was like, there's still something, there's something, I want more. And I was teaching master classes at a company that I was acting at. And I really liked teaching as an artist and teaching other artists. And it's something that really drew me and I was interested in. And I was given an opportunity with this company they trusted me to create materials and lessons that were unique at the time. And so I wanted to get an MFA so that I could have a terminal degree so that I could teach. So I applied to grad schools after, 20 years as an actor. And of all the places that I was offered a position, affordability and closeness to my family were two criteria. And so York University was my best choice. And so I came to Toronto in 2017 to go to grad school and graduated in 2019.
You never left.
And I liked it here so much, I wanted to stay. So here I am.
Nice. Love that. And what are some I know some of them, but our viewers, our listeners, what are some of the genres that you've had the opportunity to explore? Because you have quite a palette, my
Oh,
friend.
yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah, I've done, children's theater. I love doing children's theater. And, I've done commedia, was in a touring commedia troupe in San Francisco for a while. They taught me how to pass juggling and use a slapstick, and that was awesome. Done some Shakespeare. I've done some new plays, which has been fun. It's fun when they get printed, it's fun to see your name in there too, and that's exciting. I've also done a lot of performance art in the last, I guess, like 10 years. I've been doing some performance art for, visual artists. Some of that is like performative lecture. Some of it is, movement and gesture along with text. and some of it is just voiceover for video components. And that's been super rewarding. I've learned so much from working with visual artists. And they're also, I think, one of the reasons why I'm here today.
Right. So many hats have been worn, have been worn and yeah, and carried forth. Love
I
that.
kind of feel like though, at least based on from what I've noticed in Toronto, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, so many performers here, they wear more hats than I think I know what to do with. And I feel really like a one or two hat wearer person. So I feel a little what's the word? Not useless, not incapable, but like that I just don't have enough hats. That I need to have more
I feel
hats.
I would agree. I do feel like I mean the past few years we've been in, I think artists have had to like put on more hats than their body or head could carry. And it'd be curious to see if that continues, right? Do we just now all walk around as like a walking coat rack of hats, right? Or do we kind of settle back into the one or two? But yeah, that's interesting, and I would love to unpack that when we get further into our discussion of
Oh.
your experience with like American and Canadian yeah, navigating the system. But before the theatrical system, that is, before we pivot too much, you did mention the nugget of you being a theater educator or having experience to kind of be in that position. So, like, who and what are the demographics that you've taught? And, how did some of the experiences, how did they differ? How are they similar? 'Cause it's quite a big umbrella.
Well, yeah. So now I can say in my lifetime of being in theater education as a teaching artist or as a guest artist or even as a sessional instructor, I can now say that I have taught everywhere from 9 months old to 87.
Love that. No one left behind. Everyone is touched by theater in some way. That's
And
great.
during the pandemic, because we all have to do a little extra hustle and during the pandemic, I have taught in a week I've taught 3 to 10 year olds. I've taught 18 to 40 year olds, and then I've taught 50 to 78 year olds. Yeah, yeah. So with young people, I teach with the Canadian Contemporary School of Art, and with them, we've been doing a lot of drama games online that coincide with a different country's culture. So, by examining how different cultures utilize theater, or specifically cultural rituals that involve theater, and creating exercises where we can explore a little bit of the cultural content and be able to make our own version of those stories that each culture tells. That's a lot of fun. Like I
That's
got to
great.
do
Yeah.
a little rokugo with some of those students, which is a traditional one-person comedic monologue where you're given very little props, and so you really have to use your voice and your body language to express which character is speaking. Because also you don't get up, you don't move, you stay and you're seated as you do this, and it was so much fun to do. Um, Another thing that I do with young adults is also online. Is I have a character named Flora Fabuloso with a company called Super Now, and she is a magical gardener with her sidekick Titania, who is a locally made crocheted butterfly by an artist in Toronto. And we do magical gardening. We use our observation skills about certain flowers and plants that we encounter in real life. And we learn certain cultural and scientific facts about the flower. And as we look at it from an observational point of view, after we've learned a little bit, then we use our creative imaginations to draw, what we can do with the flower, how the flower inspires us, cultural facts about the flower that they can create their own imaginative and magical landscapes or creatures or whatever. That's a lot of fun.
Fascinating. I want to be a
With
part of that garden. That sounds so much fun.
yeah, come on down. For X University, the Chang School, I teach in their 50 plus education program, where I teach a very basic form of therapeutic clowning so that the graduates of the program, and part of their graduation is doing a practicum in long-term care homes of Toronto, specifically working with residents that have some kind of dementia or other cognitive limitations. And I've been doing that now for 2 years
Right.
and I really love it. They're a hoot. And then I've been a sessional instructor at Brock University, exploring heightened text. And
Great.
so, yeah, we really look into either Shakespeare or Moliere, and now we're doing Samuel Beckett. And so they're learning how to really mine text and find all of the sources and evidence of building a character and, truthfully speaking, that character's struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what an interesting vehicle, Beckett, because there's a lot of hunting and subtextual discovery you have to do with his characters, right? So I think that wow, that's a wonderful exercise. Yeah.
It's mighty. It's
Mm-hmm.
mighty. The text I chose this year was That Time, and
Mm-hmm.
that time has absolutely no punctuation whatsoever. And so it's I find it very exciting. The students are a little overwhelmed. They're starting to cut off little morsels and recognizing that it is food to eat.
Yep.
Um, and
Great analogy. Yeah.
and so they're on their journey, and this is also something that for them as young performers, right, as undergraduates, some of them have never really uh, truly done the deep work that actors do. We really do study, and we study from all kinds of ways. We really use lateral and horizontal knowledge to be able to psychophysically embody a character, and this is something that they're really first discovering, that it's not just memorize your lines and stand up on stage, that it actually is a lot more than that.
Yeah. And I've always said this too, like, no matter where you are in your path as a person or as an artist, like there's always room for more tools in the tool belt, or how you operate on something one way could be totally different the other way, or maybe should be totally different the other, and there's always those opportunities to discover a different angle into something. And something I love that you've brought to the table in all of these sort of like age subcategories that you've been teaching over the last couple of years, and the exercises you've been doing, each of them I think have like a different angle or a different way of exploring text and art that like is sometimes not present if you go to an institution or you do master classes or you do a more contained space, like um talking about the garden and how it's like you're learning scientific facts alongside the like palette of a flower, and then you're taking the sort of imaginative exploration, physical or vocal exploration, and then drawing about it. And it kind of goes back to you saying your close connection with visual artists and how it really is the whole umbrella of art that makes art. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure and this is probably one of the reasons why I enjoy your company so much, is that all of this it's informing, it's exciting,
Mhm.
and as we're expanding our sensibilities and expanding how we perceive the world and how others perceive the world, and I mean, it's such a magical and joyous experience to be able to then utilize that knowledge in a way that comprehension is lived.
Yeah.
And how exciting is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think this is a wonderful pivot to a question I want to ask you about, because you've mentioned that the last, like I said, the subcategories that you've been teaching, a lot of it has been online due to the last couple of years. You've had to kind of pivot there. So you've been very active in that sense of what you've just said of approaching art from this digital point of view, these rectangular boxes, if you may.
The
Um,
tiniest proscenium.
yes, exactly. Um, so yeah, so sort of pivoting us to like an online format. How has that experience been for you? And do you see, even though as liveness kind of starts to become a thing again, do you see yourself continuing to explore the online outlet? Um, yeah.
Yeah, great question. So, in the beginning pandemic times, in the early
Hmm.
period of pandemic times,
Yes.
I really thought a lot about acting methodology, pedagogical perspectives, what can be done in this format. And, some friends and colleagues also helped me find sources to read about. I had to do a little bit more research on film and strategies of, how actors work on film and how can I use that language in a way that still is theatrical. And in all of that research and in all of that really thinking, there are a couple of things that I came up with, which other people came up with. I mean, it's, not original, but that there are some things that translate in both theater and film. And an actor's work, even though there may be certain things about distance and relationship to the camera and to the audience and how that's perceived in a more filmic setting, the actor still has a relationship to the text. They have a relationship to their audience. And what is the bridge between those two things is the actor themselves. And so the actor's work is still the same. But the awareness of the audience and spatial dynamics are just different. And
Yeah.
so I really tried to think about that intentionally. And
I think
I
that,
thought it was
yeah.
pretty effective.
Well, then that's such an important morsel to kind of keep in the back of your head, because as someone like, both mediums can be so different, film and stage, but like you're so right. It's like you're the same person either behind the curtain or behind the lens. So it's like what does the actor, yeah, prepare as sort of like the consistent foundational base for themselves so that they can jump into any container, whether it be live, on set, on a stage, and just act, like just
Yep.
be what they need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are some, right? Like in film, so much of what our imagination holds
Mhm.
is more of the way in which we express text in film and television. But there are lots of texts, and some avant-garde, some not, that do require a very similar thing, a really active imagination. To see out, you're out of your fourth wall, the ruined landscape, and really it's, Spotlight Harry and, Henrietta,
Yeah.
and you have to use your imagination that way.
Hmm.
The same thing goes for is that, our energy, even though we may be really close to the camera,
Hmm.
our energy still needs to transcend the distance of the camera or the distance of the audience. Still need to fully embody something so that it transmutes.
Yeah. Of course.
And so that's one of the things that so now I've had students where, we've been online and we've been in person. And so, part of the conversation now is that the pandemic isn't going away as far as we know. There have been a number of industry innovations that have happened. We've become accustomed to a certain that now a style of communication that includes the camera as part of the everyday conversation. So um, uh, both being in person and being online, art will happen in both directions, and so it is important for a student of of performing to understand that there are these hybrids and that we need to also take that into consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
And I found over the last few years too, like for instance, I met you online. I met you
I
doing
know.
virtual play reads of Shakespeare. Um and yeah, I think like this, we're doing this interview on Zoom, but there's been various, virtual platforms throughout the past couple years, and I think the commonality is it there it was like a built sense of community that we kind of had to dump ourselves into. But I've said this a few times now, but it's like some of my closest relationships over the last few years have been the digitized ones.
Mhm.
Because I think, you jump into a meeting, whether it be Zoom or MS Teams or a FaceTime, and it's a carved out time. So it's almost that sort of encourages or puts more reliance or responsibility on the idea of presence, right? Like what it means to be present because you're in a container of time. You're constantly only seeing folks from like the torso up. So it's not like, if you turn your head to look at your phone or if you seem disinterested, like you're very much in your partner's or group's face. So it's just cultivated a very interesting level of presence. And then to add on top of that, doing a play reading or doing rehearsals for an audio drama, but using this platform for it, or even doing Zoom plays over the last couple years. There's a sense of self that I think most people have discovered through this digitized way that maybe we wouldn't have had the time to unpack if we were still doing just kind of like film theater, right? There wasn't this sort of hybrid opportunity to find, I don't know, like
Yeah, so
I'm
interesting.
fascinated by it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's something also that I thought a lot about, and it's something that I do teach students, especially online. But it's a recognition of how we utilize space, and as just to go further than the pandemic, is that we're also living in smaller and smaller and smaller spaces that are more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. And so that's why having when you have really small apartments, it's great then to have other public amenities, right? To have a park nearby, to have a cafe, to have somewhere to go so that you can uh, have the space to interact with other people, or to be able to change the frame of your space so that
Yep.
you can work in other ways. And so at the time of full shutdown, we do need to think then a little bit more creatively about our space and what space can transform as. We think of home as something that's really static, and not only that, but home for most people then is the place where we express our personalities. And so our personalities are laid out into the space to define as a personal space, not a public space.
Right.
But then if you're working from home, how then do you, and we've seen, like, one of my favorite things to do is to watch news programs on Zoom,
Hmm.
because we get a window into their non-studio life. And we also get a window into how they've decided to curate their backgrounds
Yep.
as a way to also, present a certain, message or persona, or mise en scène
Yeah.
aesthetic. And I just find it absolutely fascinating.
Hmm.
So this is where we do that. We need to be more flexible in thinking about how do we utilize this home space. How do we make it something that's creative? How do we make it something where we need to do our homework or our research or learn our lines, or write a paper, or whatever it is, and then to actually then have the place where we can decompress and say goodbye to the world. And it's tough, except for when you use your imagination. When you use strategic thinking and your imagination, you can transform your space and how you utilize it. And I think that's something that we're also becoming more more clear about, especially now, right? Self-taping has become such a huge part of the industry and will not go away because it's just more affordable.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
at least for the industry, maybe not so much for the actor. Yet another thing that an actor has to shell out dosh to self-invest. But this is we learn how to. Okay, this is going to be my studio for the day. This is what I need to do to make this my studio.
Yep.
Work my best this way.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also, with liveness kind of coming back slowly but surely with different projects and stuff. The question always comes in my mind too, or even just thought of cherishing space. I think like before the last couple years, things would be very status quo and you take things for granted. And me personally, being a perfectionist and, being in this industry, my perfection has been an obstacle for me sometimes because things obviously don't go as planned and you have to be ready to pivot and you have to be flexible and malleable. And I've definitely gotten better at it and I'm continuing to learn. But I've noticed even past projects, coming back into the live sphere again, it's like easier. It's almost like there's a pressure taken off because it's like you are in a space with other people and you're doing art. And it's like, I think we take that for granted. And I know personally, being in a digitized contained space, and like you were saying, you've had to kind of create that space. And maybe I'm calling in from my parents' basement this week, but I'm calling in from my apartment master bedroom the next week, but it's still the same project. So, instead of being like, it's like, well, no, this is my laptop is my theater space, basically. So I found kind of going back into in person, there's less pressure. There's more ease of like focus on the project, focus on how, like we talked about earlier, like you as the vessel, as the performer, and interact with people, connect with people, and then the art kind of can ooze over with those foundations in place. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I'm going on
Yeah,
this like
no, totally.
ethereal
I'm digging it.
and
I'm totally digging it. And it's one of the other things too to add on to that is that not so much the space itself, although wow, yeah, I really do love a rehearsal room. I really do. It really is nice to be in one. I like having that sense of space. But some of it has to do with we are so accustomed, like you were talking about before, about the taking for granted, right? This idea of cherishing that we forget, which was part of why so many people had Zoom fatigue, I think, is because they're not used to having to rely on other senses more primarily to be able to read someone else, to be able to get clues off of someone else so that you're listening and responding. We're so accustomed to have just be able to sense somebody, um, and to see full body cues, and so we feel more attuned to that because that's what we know. And so, but since we've been on Zoom, people coming back into the full space of being in rehearsal, they also recognize they're exhausted, that
Mhm.
it's a different kind of stamina of attention and focus.
Yeah.
And they both require it. And I think that they both require it equally. I
Yeah.
think you can have really. I mean, you and I have experience from from Rogers Shakespeare Zoom reading group that I mean, there were just what was it, Henry V that we did? Oh my
Henry
gosh.
V and Lear, King Lear too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean the Henry V, Henry and then
Yeah.
Catherine. My goodness, it was such a moving
Yeah.
scene between the two of them. And they didn't need to be in the same room. My goodness, I mean that was fire, delicious fire.
Hmm.
you know and so yeah, so there are new things that are happening since people are now coming back into space with each other.
Yeah.
It's also much more trepidatious about proximity. I mean,
Mhm.
COVID included, but part of it has to also do with it's been so long since I've been so near that
Yep.
the energy, it's like being overwhelmed by a supermarché, a giant huge, like how many wall to wall, 15 feet of detergent. I mean, it's mind numbing.
Yeah.
And so like that people's energy, more
Yeah.
than, if it's a 15-person ensemble, my goodness, that's a lot of energy to take in. It can be
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I like what you said that I don't think, it's true. I don't think this pandemic is ever going away per se. And I think we will always have ebbs and flows and highs and lows. And I would like to hope that we will stay hybrid, because I also think there's an accessibility of reaching out to like folks beyond the border, right? Well, with what you just mentioned with Rogers Shakespeare virtual reading group, we were from all over. Renee was in Scotland, most of them were sprinkled all over the States, and some of us were the Canucks thrown in there too, right? And yeah, just like, meeting community beyond the community you would even think you would be able to reach. So I think there's that too. There's this sort of like cross
Oh yeah.
pollinating of ways of doing things, of cultures, of experiences, and bonds created from that as
Oh
artists
my
and then as
gosh. Yeah.
people too. Like, and that's just as important in this industry. I think a lot of the times we sometimes forget that, right? That it's like human connection, connecting with others, it influences the art.
Oh
It
yeah. Well, if
yeah.
you're working with someone who's just, not a very pleasant or helpful or communicative human being, it makes being at work kind of a drag,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know?
Totally, totally. So yeah, I hope we stay hybrid, and I hope you keep doing this digital, little masterclass things from babies to senior citizens. It's so important at every stage of life, right? And yeah, getting folks comfortable with this medium and with themselves in this medium and what that means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
With my elder clowns,
Hmm.
the technology is a big component of the classwork, and how do we incorporate play with new technical knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was
just
talking with my students about that our craft relies on these parts of our brain that are not reliable.
hmm,
They are circuitous in their way of pulling memory, stimulation, behavior, emotion, knowledge, experience, how it all, comes back up in here and through here. It's always different. And so it makes sense that no matter what you do, it's always going to be different.
yep,
Always going to be different.
yeah, yeah. That's why, again, going back kind of full circle, what we've been peppering in here and there of like finding that foundation of self or care of self, or, in relationship to self, and have that be a constant, consistent foundation. So then all of this layering and these like sometimes deeper accessibility we have to have with like with cognitive thinking and movement and voice.
Yeah.
Like these are all layers on top of the same cake, basically.
Yeah, and I think needs to be taken more seriously in drama training. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think there, just like there's in your final year, you may learn things about auditioning or
Budgeting or
right,
agents. Yeah.
budgeting and
Hmm.
pitches and things like that. I really think that the very beginning of schooling should be about developing a personal practice so that
Hmm.
you can have self care, that you can sharpen your self awareness and your interpersonal awareness,
Yeah.
and that includes things like, consent as well. But that first year really needs to be the foundations of having good habits so that whatever is thrown your way, you have a strong enough and a resilient enough foundation to be able to sort through it.
And starting that in first year of like training as
Yeah,
opposed to
it should be
fourth
first
year.
year. Yeah.
Because also, having experience, I almost now have equal experience outside of training than I did, like equal in school and out of school, outside of school now. And being in a theater training program is astronomically different than being out in the world doing the craft.
Mm-hmm.
So by having this sort of self-care, awareness, personal practice start in first year of training will
Mm-hmm.
obviously help you in the real world, but will absolutely help you navigate the beast that is theater training too.
Yep.
Like, because that is very different. Especially if you go, like, my program was a balance between academia and practical practice. So having some sort of common ground to, like we were talking about earlier, sew the brain and body together, and learning that from first year is very important for longevity and for present, like, presence in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an ability to self-advocate and,
Mhm.
taking care of themselves. Yeah, being able to negotiate with each other about what works for them and what doesn't, what they
Yep.
need. Yeah.
Yep.
Hear that, folks?
That's it. We're cooking up these ideas, and in the
Saving the
next
world.
2 to 5 years, they will be fully manifested. That's how that works, right? No. But we have to keep talking about them, because the more we are talking about them, the more we're in conversation with them, the more they
Yeah,
become
yeah,
actionable,
yeah.
and
One
here
of
we
the things
are.
I
Yeah.
loved, I was asked by a theater school if they felt that, along with having that kind of actor training in the beginning, if they felt that having a mental health professional on staff in the drama department, if that was something I recommended. And I said yes, it needs to be a part of the whole. If you want a holistic practice and you want a healthy, thriving actor, you need to have mental health support on team, on staff, and not outsourced. It's a shame. It really needs to be part of the whole administrative or whatever
Absolutely.
staff.
And that also, alongside that, would continue to destigmatize mental health awareness, and, and having, you don't ever have to tap that person in the room, or, use them to map, but knowing that they're there, and that that is a possibility for you and your colleagues at whatever time of the process. Just having that person there, would just, yeah, like, create less tension, or let, and normal tension, and but in a room, in a space, right?
Yeah, and help
um
build, coping skills and coping strategies when
yeah.
dealing with, challenging material,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is something that I'm kind of struggling with. One of the things that I'm struggling with um is when is the acting profession not for you?
Okay.
And there's let's say that there are some people that there are only a limited amount of stories that they feel confident telling as a performer. And and it the way I was trained, the way I imagine an artist, who does theater, an actor, I imagine it as an expansive amount of a lexicon and toolkit and palette to play with as an artist. I want to work with as many tools as possible to be able to tell stories across the human condition.
Yeah.
But that's just how I was trained.
Hmm.
Who's to say, and some people like, uh, Jack Nicholson, or even, or Kim Kardashian, who've made a career off of just their celebrity at this point. I mean, Jack
Yeah.
Nicholson, did maybe more creative things when they were younger, but now they're just them, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
And so they've made a career out of that. What's wrong with that? And
Right.
so that's one of the things that I'm being challenged by is or you know uh, you know taking a wellness break during a rehearsal process,
Mhm.
like what are the criteria that makes it okay for everyone, that everyone
Yep.
feels that everyone's being supported and everyone's time is respected, you
Yep.
know and that's something I'm really confused by right now.
Hmm. No, I think to build into that conversation too, there's the moment where, people, and especially the pandemic, it definitely, from like a financial perspective, from like a life slapping you in the face with a force that it's never been met with before, right? You see a lot of people pivoting outside of the craft, and that's where their path is now. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of going back to what you just said of when is the career not for you, right? To like when do you yeah, pivot yourself to a whole nother field, or um like we talked about wearing all the hats, and pivoting even to wearing one hat, only this hat. It's again, it's going back to the psyche, it's going back to the it's like, where's that shift, when is that shift, why is that shift, right? I mean, there's tangible factors, a lot of it like I said, financial desperation, and even building into that mental wellness. Like, this industry is difficult to make a career and to stay in it and to stay in conversation with others. Like I said, there's an exhaustion level with that. Some folks don't want to do that, and that's totally fine. And yeah, but it's like when, why, how, all the things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm the sun is starting
It's
to
okay.
come into my
It's
window, so i'm
it's
i'm getting
nourishing our garden.
so I'm a little overexposed.
We honestly, like, we could talk years on this. Should do like a
I
performance
can't wait
piece
for
at one
our
point where,
pizza date. When do we get a pizza date?
yes, we're totally going to do that. We'll loop Ryan into the pizza date. It'll be great. Okay, so we've unpacked so many things. We've talked, the spectrum of life has been discussed here
What
today.
is the meaning of life?
Yes. Where do we go? What is here? What is here? What is now? So with the plethora of work you have done recently, you have upcoming. Where can we keep up with you? Where, social media wise, projects coming down the line.
Hmm.
Floor is yours.
I do have the Facebook.
Okay.
I do have the Instagram. I stopped doing Twitter.
Mhm.
That was too
Never done
much.
Twitter, so yeah.
It was interesting. I made friends with lots of trolls.
Not the type of networking that we
Right, right,
like to do.
right, right. Not the kind of followers I really, I have a website. It needs to be fixed. I can send you all of those things
Great.
and whatever they are.
Mhm.
And I do keep them current though. So like, there's a project that I'm working on that's posted on my Facebook. And so yeah, any project that'll happen, Facebook will be the place that I'll post it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds
If
wonderful.
with Instagram, if you're most of the things I photograph with Instagram are found art and found language. So like I love graffiti. I love notes that people leave on the street, lists, stickers. I also have a fascination of fire hydrants in nature, and it's actually a hashtag, fire hydrants in nature, and I photograph fire hydrants in nature.
Gosh, I love that.
Some other people have contributed too, which is excellent. So, yeah, yeah.
My little nephew is obsessed with fire hydrants. I'm going to tell him about this
Oh my
page.
gosh, fire
I
hydrants in
I also I
nature.
also just think fire hydrants are so cute. Like, they're
They're
just little
so
short,
interesting.
stumpy things that just show up. They're like, "Don't park near me. You're not allowed to park near me, but I'll sit here with my cute blue hat and, be here
Well,
if you need water."
when I was a
Um,
kid, we would open up the faucets in the summertime and play in
okay,
the
yeah, yeah.
street with the
Right.
fire hydrant. back in the day before air
Back-
conditioning.
Right.
Go run out and turn on the fire engines and run in the street half naked. It's so much fun.
Ugh, be a kid again. Great. Okay, so yeah, folks, you heard it here.
Oh,
Follow Corey on Facebook or on Instagram or the Fire Hydrants in Nature Instagram page. Yeah, as usual, follow our pages. We are on Instagram, we are on Facebook. If you are watching this on YouTube, go ahead and like, comment, share, subscribe. We want to hear from you. If you're listening to us on podcast, give us a review there as well. And just a huge thank you again, Corey, for joining us. And I love all of our conversations. We are exploring self, art, through art, in art, with art, in life. Yeah, and I know our viewers, listeners they are getting nourished. Their gardens are nourished today too. So with that, we will give a hearty cheers. And stay well and safe and healthy, folks. And we will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.